Hi there. In this video, I'm going to interview Dr. Talia Marcagiani. She's a naturopathic doctor based in Toronto. We actually share an office at Bloor West Village. And she's going to talk to us about some self-care ideas. We have a whole host of different ideas that we go through. She's going to talk about why self-care is important and the chemistry behind self-care, what happens when you don't take care of yourself and what happens when you do. And also she will talk about the base method of self-care. So she also has a self-care workbook, and those links are in the description below. So we look forward to sharing this interview with you, and I hope you find it helpful. Thank you. Hi there, my name is Melissa Johari. I'm a registered social worker here in Toronto, and it is June 2020. So this is the fifth video as part of my self-care series. The first one was on box breathing. The second one was on progressive muscle relaxation. Third was on grounding. Fourth was on visualization. And then this week, I'm interviewing Dr. Talia Marcagiani, who's a naturopathic doctor specializing in mental health, and she's going to talk to us about self-care. And then next week, I'm going to do cap things off with kind of a summary of a whole host and list of different self-care activities or ideas that hopefully can offer you some inspiration. So without further ado, here's the video with Dr. Talia. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Hey there. Let me just log in. Hey, what's up?
How are you?
We're recording. I'm good. How are you?
Good. You're so fancy. You have a microphone there and everything.
Yeah, it's my podcasting mic. It's come in handy. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a great website, and you're so good with the social media stuff.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm not the best, but I'm trying. Especially lately with the protests and George Floyd's murder and COVID and stuff like that. I just felt like compelled to do something. So, so that's what sparked this whole thing, right? In terms of this self-care series. So, but anyways, before we get into that, let me introduce you.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you for joining me. And so this is Dr. Talia Marcagiani, and we share an office space at the Bloor West Wellness Clinic at Jane and Bloor. Bloor West Village. So we met there, and we used to be there on the same days, but now our days are different, so we haven't seen each other for a little bit, and now with COVID, the office has been closed, so we especially haven't been seeing each other. So how have you been dealing with all this stuff and anxiety and everything going on?
I mean, I've been good. Like, basically, it was a huge pivot to an online practice in very short notice. Which I think most of my colleagues and most people are noticing decrease the flow for sure. Like, I think I'm seeing about 25 to 30% of the people I normally see, which was scary at first, but I think some other things were adjusted in terms of like some of the subsidies and stuff to support the business side of things. So that's okay. So once that sort of financial anxiety and financial security part calmed down, I started to just focus on some other projects. Like, I launched a podcast. There were some things that I wanted to do, some like projects that I had on the back burner, and I didn't actually end up furthering those projects. There's all this resistance around them. And I was like, oh, maybe it's a motivation issue. And then these other things just flowed. Like the podcast was just,
because I didn't know you had a podcast. So that's a new development then, eh?
Yeah, it started off with doing interviews with colleagues on my Facebook group. So just having conversations around like this around self-care. And what Zoom does is pump out an audio. And so I upload it to a podcast platform with an intro, and it's extremely easy
Oh, man.
to, yeah.
Well, we'll have to chat on a later date about that, because I was entertaining that idea, but it all just seemed very daunting to me.
But it's so easy, yeah, because you already have the audios. I think a lot of people prefer listening to audio as well, because you don't have to have, it's not intensive in your data.
Yeah,
You can do other things and walk around and just have it in your pocket.
like
And
drive, like when I listen to
yeah,
podcasts all the time, so
exactly.
well,
Yeah,
right now, but when I was commuting a lot, yeah, I
yeah,
was always listening to podcasts during the
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
great.
And also, like, I mean, it's you're really, it's the guest that you're interviewing is producing the content for you. So you're just having a cool conversation with someone that you like and someone who you want to learn more from.
Yeah,
That's it. You're then that's it. You've got content. So it was like
yeah.
just this really smooth process. I had all these episodes up, and now I kind of roll them out once a week. So I'm not so that there's always something going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to have them kind of prepared ahead, so you don't have like that anxiety of, oh, I have to like produce something now, like today. So it's good
Exactly.
to kind of have a reserve, so then you can
Exactly.
space it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Although once you have a conversation with someone, you're all excited about. I'm always excited about it, and I want it out now. But
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. And I tell the person, I'm like, I'm gonna release yours on Monday. I'm gonna move everyone else. And I'm like, that's not fair to everyone else. Also, I have all the content lined up for that person's episode, and I call the episodes by the numbers that they're launched in the sequence that they're launched in. So I'm like, I can't. I'm gonna have to re-record. Like, I'm sorry. I actually have to do this like in 4 weeks. Yeah. Sorry.
One good time.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
amazing. Good for you.
Yeah.
And you look well. You look nice and tanned.
Yes, I've been surfing. Well, I've been out on the water and camping. Yesterday was this really good surf day on Lake Erie, so I was doing that.
Yeah. I love
Some surfing in quarantine, some secret surfing in quarantine. But now the beaches are open, so that's okay.
Yeah. 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 Maybe one day you'll be able to teach my son how to surf.
Oh
He
yeah.
loves the water, and he's very coordinated and has good balance.
Uh,
And yeah, I think he would, and he's strong. Like I think he would really love that.
yeah.
Anyways,
And
it's
kids are fast. Like my friend's son, I think he was 12. He's athletic, like a soccer player, and he was like up on waves first week, like surfing like a natural. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. 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 Adults not so easy, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'll definitely teach him. Yeah. We'll get him out in the water, get him a wetsuit, and we'll go.
I
Yeah.
know. Well, yeah, especially here in Canada, you need a wetsuit for.
Yeah. Yeah, even yesterday I was in a wetsuit, and I was feeling pretty cold at the end, but I was surfing till like 9, so
Yeah,
I still needed one. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so should we dive into the self-care?
Let's dive into self-care. Yeah, speaking of surfing, because that's one of my main self-care activities.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions for you. What's your favorite kind of self-care?
So, I mean, surfing is like, I think a subcategory. Well, surfing is a passion for sure. It's like probably one of my favorite sports right now. But I mean, it fits within the category of physical activity and nature time and outdoor time.
Yeah,
It's a big category for me. So it's something that I have to do daily, no matter the weather. And I try and coach patients to do that too. There's a bit of resistance around that, but I mean, it has a massive impact to be spending at least 20 minutes outside a day in a natural setting, preferably. It's not quite the same if you're just walking around like sort of a concrete area. Like if you can get into a park or a place with trees or some sort of natural setting, the effects on the nervous system are massive. So for me, that's a huge, huge thing. And it's something that has not been hard for me to maintain. Other things are difficult, like certain workout routines or being organized around eating. Like certain things are not that. Sleep is a difficult one for me to be organized around, but not nature. So there's sometimes momentum that can be generated, where it just becomes, maybe having a dog is helpful too, because you have to go outside in rain and in snow.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. We both have therapy dogs. We both have dogs that we brought to the office, so we can I love that. And that's a great self-care thing too. Just even it gives you an excuse to get outside and bring the dog out for a walk, and the dog helps to like bring down the anxiety level and the hypertension and blood pressure and all these things. So dogs are amazing kind of tools for self-care. So
Totally.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that
there's like research on them for pain management, for even for kids learning to read. So with learning disabilities, they're helpful. Like there's all this research on the benefits of dogs.
amazing.
Therapists, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and clients love them too, right? Most of them. There's some like in the whatever it is, I don't know, 9 years now that I've been doing private practice. There have been maybe two people who had a fear of dogs, and so we had to kind of work around that because Gilly is usually at the office. But usually by the end, they're like petting her and happy,
Oh,
and
wow.
they're happy to see her next time. And so yeah,
Amazing.
she's helped a few people kind of overcome their fears. um,
Mm.
so
But
yeah,
she's so sweet too and so calm that she's a great dog to work with if you're scared of dogs.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, she has that disposition.
Mhm.
So and kids love the dogs
Mm.
too, so it's
Mhm.
nice, nice for the kids to be able to come to the office and see Gilly there. But
Mm.
yeah, so surfing, dogs, any other
Sure.
interests that you have?
I mean, for me, like food is always important. It's one of my pillars for sure for working with patients and for myself too. So I always feel better if I'm eating real food, you know, and I have my own tweaks and things I've experimented with and ways I've sort of organized my eating. That's been really important is like, and that's actually what one of my struggles around the COVID, like what was happening around, I don't know, lockdowns, I guess. We didn't really have lockdowns, social distancing, you know, and some of the closures that were happening.
Yeah.
Um, was that I was sort of not on a routine anymore. Like I was still eating well. I was still eating the normal things I eat,
Mhm.
but for some reason, I don't know, it was this disconnection from my body. And I think that I was underestimating how important social connections are for food and for nutrition, because you
Wow.
eat with people sort of, your schedule regulates you know, your eating timing and what you're having to eat. And a lot of my patients were saying this, like, I'm eating lunch over the kitchen sink, you know. There's this thing.
Right. Shutting
And
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that. So I've sort of, I think what was happening was that the routines were off because everything was new, and we were told that everything was temporary. Well, we didn't know. It was like, this could go on for 2 weeks. It could go on for 8 months. Some people were floating in my circles were saying September, which is becoming a bit more realistic in terms
Yes.
of when we'll
Yes.
fully open.
Yeah.
But a lot of patients were sort of saying, okay, I'll see you in a couple weeks when this is done. And so when that happens, it takes a lot to sort of establish a new routine. And if you don't think that that's going to be a permanent thing, you're
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
holding off, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then eventually, like once things just continued on as it was, then you kind of, I don't know about you, but I felt like I kind of got into a new routine, like a new,
Exactly.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Then it became like, okay, let's set an alarm to get up so that it's more consistent. Let's have an actual bedtime. Let me actually prepare lunch. Let's organize my grocery shopping, because grocery shopping was it just became this big burden for me.
Yeah.
Which it was never one of my favorite things, but it was like, oh God, I don't know what the live's going to look like. I don't know what the energy is going to be like. I don't know if there's going to be one person slow and like waiting for the cash. It's going to throw everything off. And if I'm going to get what I even need. And so there's all these stories in my head around grocery shopping.
And safety.
So getting more organized around that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, people respecting physical distancing when you're in the store. Are they wearing a mask? Are you wearing a mask? Like all these things.
Totally. Yeah. The energy, like there was an anxiety every time you went out to those sort of, they're necessary services, right? But those are the places where where there was more density of people.
Mhm.
And so you could feel how nervous a lot of people, like for many people that were quarantining, that's the only time they got out of the house, right? Or, people that really didn't want to leave,
Mhm.
were going out to grocery shop. So you're being exposed to people that really don't want to be outside.
Yes, exactly.
you know, and it's and then people who are, they're essential workers who are working there, and they're also super stressed out, you
Yeah,
know, they're being
absolutely.
exposed to people 8 hours a day. So yeah, it was not my favorite activities. It's getting a bit better as things have been changing,
Yeah,
but just being organized, like just heading into that and being like, okay, grocery shopping is a different beast right now.
yeah,
You got to go in and you got to buy more than what you normally need, buy enough for 2 weeks rather than one.
exactly.
You know, if I was getting protein powder, get 2 buckets of it.
Yeah,
So that's not the thing that sends me back.
yeah,
Freeze a bunch of stuff. So there was just new things, like you were saying, new routines to establish so that things could start working again for
yeah,
me and my lifestyle. And yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then I have a toddler as well. So there are certain stores like Costco, they weren't letting children in for a period of time. So I was really like
Oh, I
struggling
didn't
in terms
think
of
of that.
just doing a simple grocery run.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
Childcare
thankfully,
in order, that's crazy. Yeah, that's, I didn't even think of that.
yeah. And like before that, I wasn't bringing him anyways, just because of safety. I didn't want to expose him to anything. So yeah, and then childcare options all disappeared, right, with COVID. And so yeah, it was rough for a period of time, but I'm grateful for neighbors, you know, that they offered to like in this is when things were kind of in the heat of COVID and the height of COVID, right? That they offered to get some things from the grocery store and stuff like that. So yeah, managed, but yeah, it's rough. It was rough there. But yeah, thankfully now things are starting to open up a little bit. I'm able to bring him in. I just like make sure that he stays. I bring a stroller, so I make sure he stays in there, and like we have a whole spiel about don't touch anything, keep your mask on, because he has like this little mask, and of course he hates to wear it. So, anyways, all these things, but
Poor guy. Yeah,
I know.
it's
Yeah,
just, it makes me so curious to think of what it's like to grow up in, during this time. You know, like
yeah, yeah.
everyone will remember this time, and this is when. How old is Ryland again? No,
He will be 3 next month.
right.
Yeah, so he's still quite
Yeah.
little. But I do wonder, like, is that going to be part of his repertoire of I can't touch anything,
Mm.
I have to stay away from people, right? Like, is that going to be like
Mm.
affecting his personality? Because he's such a playful, social kind of guy, and so yeah, I
Mm.
do kind of wonder, like, what kind of long-term effects is this going to have? Um, and I mean that goes for a lot of people out there, like even you know people who are elderly, so they're even more susceptible and they're living by themselves, and you know if they're not able to have visitors come in or that kind of thing, it's hard because we are social beings, right? So we're meant to be um, relating with other people, talking with other people, like touching other people, hugging other people. Like so if you're kind of isolating yourself
Mm.
for months, like that's going to take its toll too. So
Totally. Well,
yeah.
that was a big thing, right? Is that those feelings of isolation. I think there's, I don't know the exact study, but there's definitely research into happiness and how social connections make us happy.
Mhm.
And some really important, interesting research is that, yes, obviously the deep connections, the family, like the big people in your social circle, like those connections are extremely important for your happiness and well-being.
Mhm.
Um, and, you know, being your authentic, people you can be your authentic self with, who you trust, all that. But the happiest people are those that have the most, I guess they're like second tier, third tier social connections, like a robust group of acquaintances, and those people that you just interact with on a, like we call it like superficial level, but the coffee shop people that you know, the grocery store person that you know, that isn't scared behind a plastic screen, you know, wearing a face mask, like the person that you always see every time you go to that little corner store in your neighborhood. Those kind of social connections are actually really important for us feeling like we're in a tribe and in a community. And we were deprived of that, and I felt that because I was like, I'm feeling really lonely and really weird, but
Mhm.
I'm still interacting with all my friends. Like I'm still doing Zoom chats with them, I'm still talking to my family, you know, I'm still visiting my parents and like standing on the street and seeing them. I'm still having deep connections, but I'm not seeing all of the people I would normally see if I was going to the clinic every day, like
Yeah.
you guys, but
Yeah.
also like the people at Coffee Tree, the coffee shop I go to, or the people at the falafel world I'd go to once a week. Like I'm not seeing anyone.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that takes a toll for sure on our like our sense of like connection, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, relating that to, so there's this huge sense of stress and anxiety in society right now. I mean, first with COVID, like everything's shut down, and then physical distancing, and then the New Brunswick massacre that happened during this pandemic as well. That was just a stress on, I think, the
Wow, yeah.
community, right? The biggest massacre in our history. And then the killing of George Floyd, that was huge. And then all the protests that went along with that. So it's just like one thing after another after another. So the stress and anxiety in society is so heightened. And so, taking that moment to do some self-care without guilt, right? And being able to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your people around you, so that you can um, fight the good fight, and advocate for the rights of others. That's huge. And so being able to take care of yourself without that guilt is so important. And can you talk a bit more about, like, even well, first of all, just why you feel like self-care is important?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think you said it. I mean, we all exist within a society, and we all exist, but we live in, and we're like whatever, physical beings, mental beings, social beings, but also physical beings, and we have our bodies have a limited capacity
Mm-hmm.
to do work, whether that be mental work or physical work, and there's a real depletion that can come with a lot of the tasks and things that we want to engage in, and and there's a lot that we have on our plates in modern society. It's like it's a multifaceted thing, like a lot of things that we can care about, a lot of identities that we might hold, right? When even just a simple example of you're a mother and a wife, and you are also someone with a career that's important to you, and you want to stay fit, it's like that's already enough. That's going to fill your entire week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you want to feel like you're doing well at those things, or that you're giving enough care and attention to those things. So self-care for me is recognizing where our energy is going, and making sure that we replenish it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we understand the idea of like filling up our car when the fuel gauge is empty, and we know that there's consequences to not doing that, right? So you don't see many cars like stalled because they run out of gas. It happened to me one time because my fuel gauge was faulty, and it was not fun. It actually, and actually it's a great analogy, because
Yeah.
that incident lost me a lot of time, right? It would have been way easier I didn't know that it was running on empty. Something was wrong with the fuel gauge, but rather than just stopping at the gas station for about 10 minutes, I was stalled on the side of the highway calling roadside assistance, trying to get a refill, right? So, slash maybe a tow if they weren't able to bring me
Oh, yeah.
gas, right?
All the
And this is what sorry, yeah, but this is what happens to us all the time, is we end up stranded on the side of the highway,
time.
needing someone to come bring us a refill. And
Yeah.
that can lead to mental health issues like depression, and anxiety. But something that we've been talking about a lot more frequently, thankfully, is burnout.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think we can, and then so yeah, so you look at like how you might be interacting with the near demands on your life, right? So you're wanting to raise your family, and wanting to excel in your career, or your studies, or whatever it is, or your hobbies. And then you have people who are engaged in activist work, which is, this conversation is coming up a lot. And I had a couple interviews on my podcast with people who are engaged in this kind of work. One who dedicates her naturopathic practice to trying to help refill the cups of those who are activists,
Mm-hmm.
and another who's working in anti-racism really closely, and in mental health. And and so they're really adamant about how we take the time to recharge and make sure that we're filling our cups up so that we can give.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's
Mhm.
so important. And can you explain a bit more about like what happens chemically, hormonally when we're stressed, and then what happens chemically when we actually take care of ourselves?
Yeah, there's a bunch of angles to look at it. So I mean, the big player we can look at is our cortisol system, like our fight or flight system.
Mhm.
So, well, cortisol is part of our fight or flight system, but so if you're in the woods being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, I don't even know if they live in the woods. Let's say you're in the woods being chased by a bear. Saber-toothed tigers, but so our nervous system's primed for these kind of attacks, these kind of episodes of danger.
Mhm.
So anytime we don't feel safe, it was primed for lack of physical safety, but that can also be emotional safety and lack of mental safety too, right? So our nervous system, whenever it doesn't feel safe, it releases the fight or flight hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline. You get the racing heart, the sweating palms. You get essentially the symptoms of a panic or anxiety attack. But this is in place so that we can run, so we can either like flight from the animal or fight it, or you can also freeze as well. And that's like a great mechanism. It gets you away from the bear. And then, once you're safe, those hormones leave your system. They're actually neurotransmitters. They leave your system, and then you feel calm again. And then you're like, okay, I'm not going to go. And then your brain learns. It's like, I'm not going to go in that area of the woods anymore.
Right.
Or if I hear a growling noise, I'm going to run, So you start to learn. Um, and, but if that's going on for a long time, like if you're just engaging in a slow jog away from this bear and you can't escape or you can't fight it off, your body then, it starts to tap into a different system, a hormonal system, where it releases cortisol. And cortisol helps you deal with prolonged stress. And again, that system's not meant to be in place for 24 hours of the day. Um, Cortisol also, like, it's one of the hormones that wakes us up in the morning, and it gives you that sense of like, I'm alert and I'm attuned, and there's enough tension in my body and mind that I can respond to things, right? Like I can go for a run, or I can have a conversation with you and generate words, which doesn't happen as easily towards the end of the day, right?
Right.
Um, and but what we're doing is we're kind of running, we're on slow jogs away from the bear, for months and months and years, a lot of us, right? So we don't really have time to decompress, and we don't have time to actually, okay, I'm safe, everything's great, everything's calm, there's nothing left on my to-do list, there's nothing I'm dropping the ball on, I don't have that sense of something might go wrong because I'm juggling 20 things and they're all up in the air, and so the chances I'm going to drop one of those things is pretty high. Or I'm not dealing with deadlines or traffic or whatever is stressful for us, right? Relationship issues. So we don't often get those moments of safety. And so a lot of us are in this, we're pumping out large amounts of cortisol. And what happens is, so either that cortisol damages our cells in certain ways, because it's just turned on too much. It's not meant to be that way. Or our body stops responding to it properly. So then it looks like we're not making enough. And we used to call that adrenal fatigue, but it's essentially like a state of collapse and exhaustion and burnout, where it's hard to get up in the morning, you're not motivated, you're experiencing inflammatory symptoms, things like hair loss and skin issues, and like they're numerous. Digestive issues is a big one. Just that, typical symptoms are like you're waking up in the middle of the night, or you're feeling exhausted in the afternoon, in the morning, low libido, the list goes on. So there are all these signs that the system's just getting depleted. And then another thing that really shows up is something that we call, it has a few names. One is decision fatigue. It's also ego depletion, or prefrontal cortex fatigue, or willpower fatigue, or different names. It's this idea that you can only make so many decisions in a day. And once you do, and once you expend that mental energy that comes from the prefrontal cortex, which makes decisions and plans and executes and does like literally everything our brain needs to do, we only have such a limited capacity for that in a day. And so by 4 p.m., usually it's around 2 to 4 p.m. for most people, that's done. And so usually what happens is that's the time all my patients are like, why am I eating sugar at 2? I'm like, well, because you're like, at 10 I say I'm not going to eat all the cookies that they put out for snack at the office, which is not a problem anymore, but now, you know, at 10 I say I'm not going to eat them, and at 2 I end up eating them. It's like, well, that's because your prefrontal cortex is depleted, and so it's, and you're probably a little bit hungry, and so making a decision or trying to weigh the pros and cons of having a cookie is impossible, and you're just going to go for it at that stage. And then that also blends into like going to a yoga class. It's easier to sit and scroll through Instagram when your willpower fatigue or your decision fatigue has been spent for the day. And that's when we're snappy and we're irritable and we're tired, and we're just like, you know, we're living more in our animal brain at this stage. We can't find words for things. We feel just kind of like, ugh, you know? So that's another thing that happens when we don't engage in self-care. Well, that's a product of like just modern living, basically.
Yeah.
And so there are things that we need to do to just try and understand the reality of that and how the demands of our lives, and then find ways to build in practices or time, and that's easier said than done, that allows us to leave those states.
Yeah. And around the typical work day, like 9 to 5 kind of work day, like that is so common to have that 2 o'clock slump, right? And so even just to have that moment during the day to recharge your batteries in some way is helpful, right? Like maybe like even if it's a 2-minute meditation over yoga, over your lunch break or something like that, or yoga over your lunch break. I remember I had I was at an office, this is like, I don't remember, maybe uh, 15 years ago or something like that, and they had yoga over lunch hour, and I thought that was just so fantastic, because it is helpful to even move your body, because you're sitting all day, so move your body, but also take that kind of mental break as well, and then you do find like you have more energy through the rest of the work day. So yeah, so things.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of being self-employed, is even when I was working at the clinic, if I had an hour break, I would go for like a quick walk, you know, and that it's massive for being able to recharge. But it's hard because a lot of people in 9 to 5 office jobs, sometimes you have more work than you can finish in 8 hours. That's a big problem a lot of people have. And so it's easier to and then once you're in sort of a momentum, it's easier to just keep going. So a lot of us are working at our desks, and I'm guilty of that even at the office, with the opportunity to go for a walk, working through lunch, and just kind of being in that space, you know, where we're like in work mode for the full 8 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, so if people do take that moment through the day, like even mini breaks to take care of yourself, like what happens chemically with that? Like what kind of hormones are released when that happens, when we do take that time to take care of ourselves?
Well, so I like to talk about dopamine and serotonin as two of the neurotransmitters that are at play, because so this is a typical scenario, is patients will be like, and myself, it's not just patients, all of us, but these are the stories I hear. They're like, okay, so I know that I feel good when I do yoga, or go to my saxophone lesson, or go for a run, or paint, or do pottery, whatever. I know I feel good when I do that, but I get home at 5 or 6. I'm exhausted, and I find myself just kind of, again, like scrolling through Instagram or watching TV, or in this sort of like mindless kind of task, you know? And it feels like, you know, and this is the difference between that kind of thing, which is like, okay, you know, doing some Netflix binge watching could be very intentional self-care. But what my patients are talking about is that it feels like it's not really nurturing. You know, it doesn't really feel like it's replenishing. It sort of just feels like, ugh, this is all I can do. And I feel like going to yoga would actually be replenishing, but for some reason I can't even imagine getting the for whatever it is, the motivation to actually go to the class. Once I'm in the class, I feel great. After the class, I'm so happy I went. But it's that moment of deciding that I can't do. And so what's happening is that prefrontal cortex fatigue, the decision fatigue, is kicked in. So we actually, because we need dopamine, and that's what activates the prefrontal cortex, we need dopamine to get us excited to do stuff. So that's, dopamine's like, oh my God, yoga would be awesome, you know? And dopamine is totally drained by that time. So we don't really have that motivation. Like it's kind of like, ugh, like, I'm not getting a reward by thinking about going to yoga, but I am if I think about eating something salty or sweet and watching Netflix, a little bit. And you get a little bit of a dopamine hit when you're scrolling through Instagram. That's what is built into it. You get dopamine hits when you're binge watching Netflix. It's built into those systems. So you're getting a bit of a dopamine hit, and it makes you feel good a little bit because it's replenishing that fatigued part of the brain. Mm-hmm. A little bit. It's not fully replenishing it, but it's giving you kind of like a bit of snacks, to kind of fill that back up. When you go to the yoga class though, and you feel good while you're doing yoga and you feel good after, you're getting more of a serotonin hit. And serotonin is got a lot of things that it does, but it's like one of the main jobs is to give us this sense of pleasure, contentment, happiness. It's sort of that, like, I'm sitting on, if you look at a beautiful image of people smiling at a picnic, like, there's a lot of serotonin floating around in their brains, and that's what we're hoping to get. So those good feelings, it's not quite a reward hit. It's not quite like that motivation, like dopamine is like nuts and knowledge. Like, you're looking like squirrels looking for nuts. Like you're kind of, oh, okay, I'm motivated. I'm looking. This is gonna be great. Where serotonin is more like you're content, you're chill, you're happy, you're like, I'm great here. Like, everything's good. Life is great.
And that's what you're looking for with the self-care.
Yeah, that's kind of like what self-care builds in. It builds in like this kind of nice feeling of like, I'm happy with my life. And that's, with depression, one of the big theories is that depression is about not enough serotonin. That's what the medications do, is try and give you a serotonin boost. Mm-hmm. Now, serotonin, though, it doesn't encourage you, it doesn't make you crave something. So you're never going to crave the yoga class or the pottery class. And at the end of the day, if you're relying on dopamine to make you crave that thing, you can't, because it's gone out of your system, right? So what, usually is helpful then is to have something built in where it's no longer a decision. So that's where classes are helpful. Things where it's like, or having like friends that are you going with me? We're going at 7. You don't want to do it. You're not really interested. You'd rather go home. There might be a bit of a struggle there when you're actually like, oh gosh. But once you're there, you're happy. So it's like, it's knowing, and then after a time, then you just trust that process, and it no longer becomes relying on motivation and that sort of craving feeling to get to class. Yeah.
Yeah. Building in that routine and habit and accountability to someone else. Like if you have a gym buddy or something like that, like, then you kind of feel obligated. Okay, I kind of have to go. I don't want to stand them up or anything. I don't want to cancel. So then you kind of feel obligated to go. And then when you're there, then the serotonin kicks in and you feel replenished and you feel good, you feel better.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's good to know, like, I mean, one of my friends, we had a conversation and she was like, yeah, I mean, it's sometimes enough for me to just have my partner say, but you love band class. Because she's like, oh, I don't want to go. Gotta get in the car. I've got to get my stuff. This seems like so annoying. He's like, but you love band class. She's like, all right, I do. Okay, yes, I'm going to go. It's like, just that reminder can be helpful, so it doesn't have to be something big, and it doesn't have to be a struggle. And sometimes if things are that big of a struggle, then you don't necessarily need to force yourself. Like we talk about this with my patients with movement and like exercise. Like sometimes you are just too tired to go. But, I mean, there is also just recognizing that you might not, it's essentially like you might not be craving it, but you might really want it in a different way, different chemicals are giving you the signal that this is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is something that your body needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Body, mind, soul, because it could be yoga, but it could also be just like going for a tea, even that can sometimes, and patients will say that they're like, sometimes, yeah, I'm like, I don't want to do social stuff. I'm done with the day and I'm just going to like veg at home. But then there's, and that's great sometimes. And I definitely have those days, but sometimes a sense of emptiness just accumulates because we don't have that self-care built in, and we don't have that comprehensive sort of balance in our lives. Things that actually nourish us are not part of our lives, and everyone's different in how often they need those activities. Like some people it's weekly, or sometimes it's small things daily, a bigger thing weekly, and maybe a big-ish thing monthly, and once a year you go on like a vacation or whatever it is, but but having some consistency there is important, you know?
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
I had during this pandemic, I had a retreat booked that
Oh,
was my annual retreat, and so I was really excited about it, really looking forward
mm,
to it. And of course, I had to cancel. It was in BC. I had to cancel it.
mm,
Um,
mm.
this like you know. Um,
I know.
so it's so disappointing because it's like that one thing I was really looking forward to for the year. Like since I did it last year, I was really looking forward to this next one. But
Was it like a yoga retreat? What kind of retreat?
a silent retreat. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. It was really
Mm,
amazing last year, and I really loved it.
mm.
So
I've actually heard that some silent retreats are being done via Zoom, which is pretty
oh,
creative. Yeah, some
different.
meditation retreats. I think it's, I forget who put it on, but someone was telling me about a day-long retreat where, yeah, you know, so like MBCT or MBSR, a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's usually a 6-hour day at the end of those 8-week programs where you do like walking meditation, you spend the day in silence, you do walking meditation, you eat your lunch in silence, and different things that occur throughout that day. And they were doing that on Zoom, which is cool, you know. So you're in your house, but you're with
Yeah,
others, and you're, you
well, and
know.
back to that accountability too. So it's actually nice to be able to like have that date that's organized, and then you're accountable to that group to actually do it because you
Mm.
can like anyone can do a retreat on their own at home and just decide, okay, Thursday I'm going to do a silent retreat at home, but then Thursday comes and maybe it doesn't happen, right?
Totally.
So it is nice, but it's actually not a bad idea to have that as part of a organized group and do that together. Yeah.
It's
And
not the same as being in BC, of course, you know, but
yeah, I mean that's part
yeah.
of it, right? Like that's part of the like being in nature. Going back to what you had opened with, right? How important nature is to you, and how
Mhm.
rejuvenating that is. And yeah, this retreat was it was on an island in the middle of like the woods. So it was and the water and the mountains, like it was just majestic. It was amazing. So this Zoom online uh, retreat isn't quite the same, but it's still better than nothing. Like
Right.
yeah, I think that's really like um, creative, right? During the time to do something like that.
Well, actually, yeah, then, you know, when you think of like, okay, what's the difference between the Zoom retreat and the BC? I mean, the big one is beauty, you know, and beauty is really important, I think, for human happiness. So we are really wired to pay attention to things that are beautiful. Um, and also the sense of awe. I was interviewing a friend for my podcast, and the sense of awe actually decreases inflammation in our bodies. And there's a few reasons why that could happen. I mean, if it's regulating that stress response we talked about, that could lower inflammation. Um, but yeah, awe and beauty and reverence and those sort of um, emotions that we feel when we're exposed to something bigger and beautiful, like looking at the stars on a night sky, being in the woods, being by water, you know, it is part of the feeling fulfilled. And maybe it's filling one's cup, fulfilling one's cup, you know, is sort of where self-care fits in.
Yeah.
And that could look different for many people, right? What we're talking about there, um, which I can actually get into. There's a couple exercises that are really useful to do. So one is, I think this is from cognitive behavior therapy, but it's definitely from mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. It's kind of a hybrid of mindfulness practices, an 8-week mindfulness program with cognitive behavior therapy. It's designed for people with depression and anxiety, but I think it's a great program for everyone. Um, and so it's called the depleting nourishing inventory. And so you list your activities in a typical day, from waking up in the morning, the first thing you eat, brushing your teeth, like really narrowing everything down, and you sort of list them on a piece of paper top to bottom. And then beside each of those activities, you decide if they're nourishing, depleting,
Mhm.
both, or both, or neither, you know. or like neutral, so brushing your teeth, you're like, is it, yeah, sometimes it's depleting, it's annoying to have to do it, sometimes it's nourishing because it feels great to do it, and I love brushing my teeth. I mean, I have a friend that loves brushing his teeth. It's very interesting to me to hear that. I'm like, yeah, I guess you could love it. It's self-care, right? And in the activities that are nourishing, you further divide them into mastery or pleasure. Because sometimes, going to like a workshop, um, so, or people's like, continuing education classes or going to school, like it's nourishing, but it's not like pleasurable like going to like hang out on a beach might be, but it's giving me a sense of mastery, and so that in a way is fulfilling and filling of one's cup, because if all of the nourishing activities are only pleasurable, it doesn't feel the same as if there's a mix. And so once you have that written down, you can take a look at your list and see, and then you can work with that. So it's building awareness into what your schedule actually looks like, and understanding, oh, this is why I feel exhausted. I'm putting D's for depleting down the entire day. And there's not a lot of either pleasure, mastery, or either. And what you can then do is decide, are there things that I could check off the list, get rid of? Or are there ways to make some of these depleting tasks more nourishing in some way? So for example, traffic, the commute to work, which a lot of us got rid of. So actually, yeah, sometimes it's actually useful, this coronavirus time, for a lot of my patients that were like, oh my God, things are much better now because I don't have to commute.
It's a forced time to slow down.
Yeah, or like my patient with social anxiety, I think that was a big, so they were like, the world's actually meeting me where I'm at now, It's interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so the morning commute, I mean, that's depleting for the majority of people. Is there a way to make it nourishing? Like, can you get into an audiobook? Can you do some sort of meditation, obviously not with your eyes closed, but can you like drop into your body and recognize where you're tense and try and breathe? And what can you do? Like, what is it possible? Maybe it's impossible to make that nourishing or neutral. Maybe it's just 100% horrible to commute to work, but it's like examining these different obligations that you have in your day, and things that you can either get rid of. Maybe you can buy a helicopter and not have to worry about the morning commute, I don't know. Or maybe there's the option to work from home. Once you recognize that how depleting that activity is, you can start making different decisions. And that can be huge in terms of just understanding like a bit about ourselves. Like, what activities do I actually enjoy? All right, I do like this. I do like this. And what things are actually draining our cup. And how we might be able to shift that if possible, even if you can shift one thing, it would be huge on your day.
Yeah, so really examining the different tasks of the day, and then trying to understand where you can shift some of the depletions, and being intentional about that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, helpful.
Yeah.
And then you have a whole self-care workbook, which I love, and I worked through that like years ago. And then when I was doing this this video series on self-care, I came across it again. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that like back in the day. And then that's what made me think of, oh, why don't I book this this interview with you and go through that together. So check out Dr. Talia's workbook on her website. Do you want to say a plug of what your website address is right now?
Yeah, it's taliand.com. And the workbook lives in the tab resources. And I can actually, we'll throw a link up so people can just access it right away. You can just download it. It's free PDF. Yeah, I was just looking at that again recently today. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that a few years ago. That's a great workbook. Yeah. So if I do say so myself. Yeah, but it just combines a lot of things that I was, working with and implementing in practice and as an intern when I was in school. And I think, it's sometimes nice to just have it all laid out in workbook format, and there's different things you can try, read about, and some things you could work through it from the front to back page as you did.
And one of the things in there was the BASE method. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, the base method is something it's something that I actually, when, so you asked me before this interview, like, okay, where'd you get it from? And it was in an article I read, and it was about self-care. Because I think for the workbook, I was researching and just hearing what other people were saying about self-care. And the base method was attributed to the SCAR Foundation, capital S, capital C, lowercase a, capital R. And I looked up the SCAR Foundation recently, and there is a little like makeup foundation called SCAR. So that's all that comes up on the first page of Google. So I couldn't find the foundation. I don't know if the foundation exists anymore. I believe it was a rape crisis or sexual abuse center. And so they had invented this sort of framework for self-care, because you think of self-care and a lot of it is like, oh, I'm going to get a pedicure, I'm going to pamper myself. Like there's this kind of idea of bubble baths, and which could definitely fall into that. But when you think of like mastery, like the mastery pleasure kind of dichotomy, there's more that can fall into that, under that umbrella. And so BACE is BACE, and the B stands for body, the A is achievement, C is connection, and E is enjoyment. And it was really helpful for me to lay that out with patients and be like, okay, let's fill this out. And this is in the workbook too. Let's fill this out and let's list all the ways that you care for your body. Like, and you could even divide this up into daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, Let's talk about all the ways that you feel like you're sort of working towards some sort of achievement, because achievement could be after I get back from grocery shopping, a super depleting activity. That feeling of crossing it off is self-care. Doing laundry, could that be self-care? Like when your closet's full of clean clothes and you have that checked off your list, that there's definitely pleasure associated with that.
Taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and we can, there's different attitudes with which we can do laundry for sure. So and then connection is, so list the people, like there's different things you can do with that list of people that you are important to you in your inner circle, who you want to set up like coffee dates with, or how are you interacting with people socially. There's a lot of research on 2 connections a day, either in person or over the phone, is being really important for mental health. And then we talked about the sort of the role that acquaintances and those like kind of low touch interactions have. And then the enjoyment is, like how are you playing? Like, most of us as adults don't play anymore, and everything's got to have some sort of purpose to it, like if I'm going for a walk in the woods, I'm clocking my steps. I'm like, that's me, that I'm talking about myself. I'm like, how many steps am I getting it, rather than just enjoying the birds, or getting lost in your mind, or so like in what ways are we actually having fun? And that was something that we would ask people as interns, like, how do you have fun? And so many people would answer like, fun, I don't know, it's fun for me to like, I don't know, go to the office. And you're like, okay, yeah, that's great if it is, but so it's like, it's really like, categorizing things under those headings is really nice, because it expands our definition of self-care, right? Because it just puts pedicures under maybe enjoyment, maybe connection, maybe achievement. For me it would be, for sure. I'd be like, oh yes, I did it. And under body care, certainly. So you can sort of decide like, where does that fall? And but my I don't know, doing my morning crossword is self-care, if that is, right? So it really helps you understand the role that self-care plays, and it doesn't make it seem like, oh, there's this thing I should be doing that like doesn't really resonate with me because I don't really want to have a bath. It's like, no, we're looking at all the ways that we're looking at the possibility for an activity that fills your cup and building that in a strategic way, as opposed to having it be something that's kind of on the back burner that you always kind of want to do and it never gets done. It's like, how do we bring that in? If the crossword is something that really fills your cup, is there a way that we can make it strategic in that every Sunday morning you've got your tea and your crossword,
Yeah. And having that balance between all these things.
Mm-hmm.
You're not only focusing on achievement, but you're also bringing in enjoyment, let's say. Yeah.
Totally.
Mhm.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. Because if all your self-care is in the realm of achievement,
Mhm.
that's good. I mean, you're doing self-care, but maybe, yeah, what's missing then? Like, are you feeling fulfilled truly? And I don't know, you could be. Like it's so it's more of just like looking at it from a lens, like it's like a personal inventory. It's like, okay, where am I at with this? Could any of this, if I'm noticing a discrepancy with any of these tools, could that explain this sense of burnout or lack of fulfillment or depletion that I'm feeling, you know? And yeah.
And then each of those, I remember something in the workbook about each of those each of those letters having some connection to chemistry as well. Like there was, each of them was related to, like one was serotonin, one was dopamine. Like
Hmm, maybe. I mean, oh, I'd have to look that up and see. I mean, for sure that, okay, so I mean the body care, um I mean there, yeah, definitely, like, so with the dopamine, serotonin, I don't know how that would fit. It's possible though. I mean, so like there's also acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter that's involved in flow states. And so that's like when you're really engaged in a task, you're sort of in this state of flow, of like deep concentration. That's also a very nourishing feeling. It's not quite that pleasure feeling of serotonin like on the picnic with your friends, and it's not quite that, like, dopamine also feels great, you know, when you, dopamine is meaning. So a squirrel looking for nuts, it's like there's nothing else in the world, this is the most important thing in the world, and you're like, you're hungry for it. It's amazing. It's amazing to be filled with dopamine. We love it, right? It's amazing to be full of serotonin. And then acetylcholine is a different state in which you are like really engrossed in something. And then there's a flow state in which you're like, if I think of surfing, like there's no thought happening. You're really just in response to nature, you know? Um, so maybe that fits into it. I mean, I would say that achievement has a bit of a dopamine tinge to it. Body care and enjoyment are have a bit of a serotonin tinge. Enjoyment could also be acetylcholine too. And the connection is a hormone called oxytocin, would be most associated with connection. Oxytocin is our sort of our love hormone, released during childbirth. It helps get the baby out. It helps create the contractions, and it also is related to breastfeeding, and it's bonding. It's maternal bonding. So it's the feeling of being warm and safe and loved and held, and you know, and so when we're connecting, truly connecting with people, we get a also ourselves. You can create oxytocin by um, doing self-love and self-compassion practices and touching yourself, like putting your hands on your own body. Um, but when we feel oxytocin, or when we're connecting with people deeply, we can get a release of oxytocin as well, which has a lot of benefit for our mental health. Like, I mean, we all know that feeling, but just like that love feeling, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I maybe it wasn't the workbook because I just looked and it wasn't there, but I think it was, I was trying to find more information on base, and then so it must have been when I was into it more that it came, I came across some site that had like what chemistry was related to each of those, but maybe I'll try to find it. I'll try to put it in the links.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a helpful kind of tool to understand kind of self-care from a holistic picture, a holistic perspective. So, so I think it's great. And so we'll put the link for your workbook on there.
Perfect.
And I should have mentioned when I first introduced you that you're a naturopathic doctor. Oh, I forgot to say that at the beginning. And that you specialize in mental health. So yeah, I think that's great, and we'll put the link for your website down below as well. And yeah, I remember like we first started talking about this when we were doing the emotional wellness workshop, right? That was like that must have been 4 years ago, maybe four.
I think so. I think it's probably 2015. I think it was the year of 2015. Yeah, you had the 12 months with different topics. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that workshop series, and so maybe I'll do it again, even like this kind of format. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, you had spoken about emotional wellness, and it's one of the wellness areas of my wellness wheel, and so I remember that was really a helpful talk for a lot of people, and there's more awareness nowadays about mental health, emotional wellness, and so I'm glad that there's more awareness out there, and so hopefully, you know, videos and talks like this will just increase that level of awareness for people, and just how important it is to take care of yourself. It's important for your own mental health. It's important for those who are around you. It's important for you to be able to help other people, and kind of rejuvenate yourself and fill your tank so you don't run out of gas. So
Totally.
yeah, so I love that analogy. And so just as we wrap up for today, so thank you so much for taking this time to connect with me, and it was so good to see you again. And
Oh, Melissa was great.
yeah, so I'm glad Gilly's right over here. She's sleeping.
I have Coco under my chin.
Oh yeah.
He had tooth surgery on Monday. He got 14 teeth removed.
Whoa, that's a lot of teeth.
And last year he got 18. And then in 2 weeks he has to get 4 more. Because
He doesn't have any teeth left.
he's going to have, I think dogs have 42 teeth. So I think he ends up with 6.
Oh wow.
The thing is that my vet was saying that small breed dogs, so he's 10, and Yorkies are notorious for bad teeth.
Yeah, that sucks.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's mad at me right now.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great.
Poor pup.
Aw.
But yeah, he ate so Coco story, actually. Coco's The Adventures of Coco. He was at my friend's cottage couple weeks ago, and he ate a dead porcupine. And the porcupine had died a year ago. So he'd walk by that spot a lot and didn't really seem interested in the porcupine grave.
Oh,
And then, after even the second weekend I was there 2 weekends in a row. Second weekend, on the second day, he all of a sudden has this porcupine in his mouth, all these quills, and he's so happy. It's like he's so excited. He's like, "Look what I found! I'm amazing! This is amazing!" And then he ate the quills, which scared me, and he ended up with the quill sticking out of his tongue and a quill in his paw. So he got those quills out, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" But he was eating normally. He was going to the washroom. Everything was fine. He seemed fine. So I'm like, okay. And then he started to get issues with his jaw and his tooth. So I brought him to the vet, and they were like, "Oh, we'll do an X-ray. There could be a quill."
great.
No quill, just dental decay. So
Well,
he survived the porcupine, but did not survive his breed predispositions. Poor guy.
thing.
He learned his lesson, because after he went back to some of where the porcupine was, and he comes back, he went to sniff it out and be like, "What happened here? I need to learn from my mistakes." He came back low with his tail down, sad,
Yeah.
dog regret.
Yeah, better to leave that.
No,
Oh, that must have stunk so badly.
I know. Yeah, it didn't really smell, but it was just I was like, he ate a bunch of quills.
Yeah.
I can't. Did they dissolve? I was scared to Google it. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, but he's okay. So somehow they dissolved. I guess a porcupine is been dead for a year. Its quills are not that indigestible, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, poor Coco. Yeah.
Oh dear. Gilly just got her grooming yesterday for the summer, and there was all kinds of mishaps with the groomer. As I take her to see someone who does it out of her home, and she ended up, there was a whole mishap with another dog who ran out of the house, and then so there was a delay. She's like, Gilly's not ready yet, don't come yet. And so it ended up that she wasn't ready until so late, and then I had clients too, right? So it wasn't until so late that she said, "You know what, can she just spend the night?" So Gilly ended up having a sleepover with her little dog friends at the groomers last night. So she was quite content.
She the groomers. I'm like, it's a nightmare. She's having a great time at her sleepover, and then here you come, we're gonna shear you. She's like, ah.
Yeah, she's so good to be groomed though. Yeah,
Aw.
her groomer likes her. But
Yeah. Some
anyway,
dogs like it because it's kind of like they're getting,
oh, it's a spa day
yeah.
for her. She rocks her, she holds her, very gentle with her. Yeah, so it's just she loves it.
Mm.
Yeah, she's
Oh,
yeah.
she's so sweet, Gilly. Hmm.
All right. Thanks again for I think my little man is waking
He's waking up. Right,
up.
it's perfect. He's right on schedule. So it's awesome.
You know, he's like, okay, I have a
Yeah,
nap.
he's like, it's 3 o'clock, Mom. Let's go. Let's get on with our day. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great convo. It was great to talk again.
It's good to talk with you as well. And yeah, we'll chat some more about podcast stuff and whatnot. But yeah, thank you again for all your information and knowledge, and I'll kind of put I'll include it in my vlog too, with some kind of like takeaways with bullet points for people. So I'll summarize a little bit.
Awesome.
Yeah, so and we actually, like, we talked about a lot of different kind of self-care ideas here as well. So so if you think of any other ones, I'm going to be having kind of, I'll cap this whole self-care series off with just kind of a rundown of all the different self-care ideas, and like highlighting some of my favorite ones. But if you have any other self-care ideas, then I'll be happy to include that in next week's video. So so we
Awesome.
leave people with a whole list of different ideas to kind of draw from, because there's different things that work for different people at different times. So yeah, we can kind of just give them all kinds of resources.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, I will do. And I'll send you all the links.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Talia.
Bye. Give Rylan a kiss from me.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found that interview with Dr. Talia informative and helpful. If you have any requests for other videos, feel free to email me directly, and feel free to like or follow or subscribe or share, depending on whatever platform you're seeing this on. However, just be aware of confidentiality risks, given that this is a public platform. Thank you so much for watching, and have a blessed day. God bless.